under wraps.
Let's do it. Let's at the point at which I thought this stream would be close to being over, we are starting our final third.
Yes.
Yes, let's talk about Venusaur. So, Tom, do you have any fond or maybe not fond? Nah, I assume fond. Memories of Venusaur.
I do. As was mentioned somewhat in the Bulbasaur episode, and it's somewhat in the Ivysaur episode,
Yep.
Venusaur is my boy. Due to the trading card game, I had a Venusaur. It was my prize card. It was like I say, I've got the whole base set, but that is the one that specifically jumps out in my mind as the one that I had, that was the treasure, as it were, and I genuinely can't remember anyone else having one. So I do really like it for that sentimental reason. I don't feel like it's very much in the anime, but because I was as much into the card game as I was, it didn't matter.
Yeah. I yeah, I feel like again because I played through the games with all of the starters, I have the same fond memories of Venusaur as I do Charizard and Blastoise. Like it was equally well suited to just learning a handful of powerful moves and smashing the shit out of everything. Um, I felt I feel like not just Venusaur, but like Hyper Beam as a move was a bit disappointing because I didn't like that it took a turn to charge up. And I still don't really like moves that take an additional turn um to prepare because I am impatient and I still don't strategize particularly well. And I think and also like Hyper Beam being um like Venusaur's it wasn't just Venusaur's signature move. But it kind of was. It was like um it was one of, Venusaur's powerful moves that I expected it to use. But it's a normal type move, so it doesn't get stab.
Mm.
And I like when I understood um what stab was, it really wound me up that one of the most powerful moves it was get was like robbed of some of that power in a way that Charizard and Blastoise's signature move did not. Um, and that I found annoying. I don't think it's Venusaur's fault. I think it's the fault of the I don't know whoever made that decision. In the same way that Ivysaur got overlooked, someone made that choice to overlook Ivysaur. Someone made that choice to make Hyper Beam a normal type move. And I get it in the wider context of the game because it's also like one of Snorlax's most powerful moves. But then they should have given something else to Venusaur. And I just don't feel like they did. Like, it had other powerful moves, it had other good moves because it was a starter. And the final evolution starters always get a really decent move pool. But yeah, it just didn't feel like it had a signature the way the others did.
Yeah. Um, does it not get solar beam
It
in the first gen?
it does, but I think because it also gets hyper beam, it's very similar. Like it also takes one to recharge, and it's just like, eh, you
Yeah.
know?
I think for me the thing that always put me off solar beam is I didn't like the fact that you had to charge it up first. Like
Yeah,
I've got more respect for hyper beam, which lets you do it and then you got to wait, versus the other way around where you might get critical hit and then it was like, what was the point of that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely get that.
I mean,
I think that makes sense, and I think that they are. Yeah, I think that was kind of that extra step I think already when it's turn-based, it kind of slows it down compared to how the action looks in the show. And then when you have to wait that extra step, it doesn't feel as exciting, especially when you're a little kid. When you're a little kid, it just sort of feels like, oh, so you're not doing anything, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think part of the problem as well is, and I feel this same way about like Blastoise, that I didn't necessarily do it when I was a kid, but like Bubble, Bubble Beam, Razor Leaf, like these are like, if you keep these as you keep on leveling up, almost become like super powerful moves that you don't have to like recharge over and over again. So like when it now I'm a bit older, when it like offers me these like moves, I'll be like, first of all, it's only got 5 PP before before I've got either whatever it is, the revive or the elixir, and or take it to the Pokemon Center, versus like it's a tiny bit less powerful, but I could just keep like Razor Leaf on it and then be done with it.
I think the early generation move pools weren't as well developed as they could have been, but I feel like you can say that about almost every element of the early generation. And I think it really primed Pokemon fans to, fill in the gaps in the game with their imagination a little bit. Because as we've said before, it's something that I am still doing now when new Pokemon games come out, where I'm like, oh, I see the potential here. And I feel like that was more forgivable in Generation 1, when it was brand new and even like video games as a genre was still relatively new. The fact that it was broken and the fact that it was a little bit underdeveloped in some areas was made up for by the fact that it was really competent and unique in other areas. And you got the idea that if it continues the way it's continuing, with another generation following the show, that you would get to a point where it would even out and become a bit more of a balanced, well-rounded game. And instead, what has happened is that it's just like massively fluctuated, where in every single game since, some of it's been fucking brilliant and some of it has been pure shite, because they focus on one thing every game, and they don't offer consistent levels of effort across the entire build. And I think 27 years, 25 years, what number was it recently in? They need to do better.
96, so it's 27.
Fucking hell.
My other, I've got 2 other big memories of Venusaur, other than the Pokemon card, which I ironically never used to play, because it was so valuable to me. But again, if you want to subscribe to the Patreon and make us do some trading card stuff, feel free to do that. But if not, I will not bore you with it. So my other 2 memories. First is that I remember the episode with the Bulbasaur garden where the massive Venusaur turns up, which I want to say from memory is like bigger than you would like imagine it to be. I feel like it's like a huge one. I mean, now that I'm starting to think about it, it's one of those things. I think once you start thinking about, like one memory, it's almost like different doors like open up. So I also remember it being in the start, in the opening theme song. I feel like it like swoops past, like the camera swoops past one in the opening credits. And I feel like there's an episode with giant Pokemon which turn out to be robots. And I feel like one of those is Venusaur as well. But my other main memory of Venusaur is there's a Venusaur in Mewtwo Strikes Back
Yeah.
that like gets cloned, and I feel like although Charizard is like Ash's Pokemon, and a clone of Charizard turns up, I feel like the Venusaur versus Venusaur gets like a fair amount of screen time for a Pokemon that we only meet in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is partly to do with it also being um a starter because there were a lot of um there were a lot of kind of the very iconic Pokemon in that scene that were not related to Ash's team per se, but were quite popular in the series because there was a Blastoise there as well. But I definitely remember the Venusaur a bit more because I think they did more to change up the design of the Venusaur because all of the others had patches on them
Mm.
um to indicate that they were clones and were like a slightly different color, but not like a shiny, just like
Mm.
a darker one, like it had been copied over with a bit of shadow on it. But I think the Venusaur, because I don't know if this is why, but it already has, the Bulbasaur line already has like patches on it. So I think they mixed up the Venusaur design a little bit more, and I think that made it stand out
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think you
as
might
far
be
as
right
I
there.
can remember.
Because I mean, the whole Bulbasaur, like, well, Ivysaur and Venusaur, they've got patches on them anyway. So yes, it would make sense that they would have to do that. So yeah, so maybe that is the reason why it stands out a little bit more. Um, so yes, those are my main memories of Venusaur. What about you?
Um, I feel like, I mean, I have memories of playing with a Venusaur, but I don't have anything. Again, like I feel like I don't want to say Venusaur was disappointing. I feel like Venusaur was let down. Like I wanted to see the Bulbasaur garden. I wanted to see Venusaur as it's like the little mushroom god that all of the Bulbasaur are drawn towards when it's time for them to evolve. Like I wanted to see that kind of thing, and I feel like the games didn't have the framework for all 151 Pokemon to tell the stories the way the show did, and that's fine,
Mm.
but that's what I wanted.
Yeah, fair.
And
Okay.
I feel like because Venusaur had those moments in the show, like the Bulbasaur Garden, and like um, you see when Venusaur is in it that it's powerful and that it's a beast. And I feel like um I think you notice that it doesn't have so much of a story in the game
Mm.
because of that. Because even though it was subtly hinted at its, true power in the show, I think it still kind of made enough of an impact on me that I wanted more for it from the games.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's
And
my key memory of Venusaur.
And do you feel that same way about Blastoise? Because I feel like, I mean, Charizard's like the main one, and then I feel like Venusaur and I feel like I can't. I mean, we'll do the research between now and the Blastoise episode, but I feel like I remember less about Blastoise than I do about the other three fully evolved starters.
Yeah, I do definitely feel similar about Blastoise. I feel like, but then Blastoise probably even, I think Blastoise is probably more hard done by in the sense that I don't remember as much of it from the show. The Orange Islands, I remember, I think a gym leader using a Blastoise. But if we're just talking about the Kanto League, there's not a huge amount of Blastoise in it. So I think the gap between Venusaur's story, even if it's in the background of the main character's story, and Venusaur in the games, the gap is bigger. because there's just enough Venusaur for me to think, like, wow, that thing's cool. I want to see it in my playthrough. And then my playthrough was, I mean, fine. It was a perfectly serviceable starter, but there wasn't much adventure to it that was different about using a Venusaur. Um, I think Venusaur had more lore to it than Blastoise did in a way.
Yeah.
And then not seeing that fully realized in the games um, is kind of why I'm left with this kind of lingering feeling. Whereas I don't know, I don't think I was I got as much Blastoise in the show so that when I came to play with it, it didn't have anything to live up to
Mm.
in the same way.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, tell you what, let's have a see what we've got for its Pokedex entry. Let's see if that intern has striked again. So I'll just get that up on the screen. There we go. Okay, so it says here, the plant blooms when it's absorbing solar energy. It stays on the move to seek sunlight, which somewhat links into what you were saying about how they could do a story where there's one that's like kept in a cave somewhere. Like, I mean, they could potentially do one where it doesn't necessarily have to be a Bulbasaur. It could be a Venusaur that's been, left in the cave, similar to the start of the Charmander, in the anime. But maybe that'd be too similar as a result. But yeah, they could do it where someone's like punishing it by making it stay in the cave, or one's got lost in a cave.
Ooh. Yeah, I like the idea of one getting lost rather than one being punished, because that feels like if it depends on sunlight for its nutrients, that feels abusive.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, they have already done that with Ash's Charmander, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like in the early episodes, you did see a lot more like trainers being quite rough with their Pokemon compared to later on where there are more kind of heartwarming stories.
Yeah, I agree. But is that because they decided that they were gonna, what's the word? That they were gonna, it was like such a big hit with kids that they were like, right, well, we're not gonna do anything other than toe the line now.
Do you remember that episode with the guy who had the whip and like his Sandshrew was wearing this little like restraint
Mm-hmm.
that as a kid was, I mean, it was just like indicative that he was restraining his Sandshrew. And as an adult, I'm like, I've seen those in nightclubs and I don't want to watch that episode again.
Yeah, you don't want to see a collared Sandshrew now, do you? When you're just
Right?
when you're just looking for something on
Exactly.
a Saturday morning.
And like, and that episode, right? Like the conflict was like Ash going up to the guy and being like, "You're being abusive to your Pokemon. You have to be a better trainer."
Mm.
And then in the end, and then Team Rocket steal his Pokemon and they come running back to him. And Ash is like, "Why are they coming back? I thought they'd just run away because they hated you." And he's like, "No, my Pokemon love me. We just train differently to you, and I hit them with whips." And then Ash just goes, "Oh, okay then," and then lets him go about his day
Yeah.
beating his Pokemon.
Yeah, the Sandshrew is like, no, it's fine. I am what is
I'm
it called?
into it.
I'm a sub
I
shrew.
haven't said Pokemon Red.
Look, I take off this harness and it goes actually very loving. They cuddle me all the time. So we have got the next thing, which is, so This here, I think, is maybe worth mentioning that. I think this is the first time that Red and Blue have got the exact same Pokédex entry. Like I feel like initially each one had its own one, but it feels odd that they would do that for the very first in the Pokédex's end evolution. So we've got the flower on its back. This is from Yellow. Catches the sun's rays. The sunlight is then absorbed and used for energy. I feel like a lot of this is gearing towards the fact that it uses solar beam. So presumably, it's them basically trying to say, use solar beam. We're going to give you the option to use solar beam, which I'm assuming comes in at around about level 50. I mean, I could check on this
It's
website.
a late stage of the game. Can I just say while we have this open?
Yeah.
I feel like this is another one where the Stadium Professor and the regular Professor were not quite seeing eye to eye. Because the one for Red and Blue says it stays on the move to seek sunlight. And the one for Stadium says when it's catching the sun's rays, it often remains quiet and still. Like, all right, one of you's got a lazy Venusaur, one of you's got an athletic Venusaur, right? Maybe look at more than one Venusaur before you start generalizing about all the Venusaurs. I don't feel like these people are entirely qualified to call themselves professors, because I don't think they have a very full understanding of the scientific method.
I mean, I'd be particular. I think that is a good observation. I'd be particularly skeptical if like it said Venusaur's trainers often feel like sending gifts to their Pokemon professor. Or if the Red and Blue one was like Venusaur's trainers particularly like picking up parcels for me from Viridian City.
That is exactly. I feel like I would like a game where you actually do write your own Pokédex.
Yeah.
And you actually you get to put in whatever thing comes to mind based on the game that you're playing. And I don't know how that would be made, but the more we compare these Pokédex entries, the more I want the opportunity to do my own based on my experiences. I mean, we could do that. We could just do that. You and I could do that as like some bonus content at some point. We'll be like, this is based. You know, you can be like, Venusaur is the rarest card, and I've got one, bitches.
Yeah. Like
that could be your Venusaur Pokédex entry.
God of War made me question my pawn choices, that kind of thing. No. Just to be clear, I only like human women and also other gendered, all of the genders really. I don't know why I said women.
I really hope you really like
the specific
human
thing
genders.
Is human. That's the bit to focus on. I don't know why I made it weird around the other things that aren't human. But yes.
Yeah, here at Talking Trubbish, we only fuck people.
This is a podcast you can trust because we do not have sex with any of the Pokemon that we talk about or want to.
I love how you added "want to" as an afterthought. Like, well, we can clearly say we don't fuck Pokemon because Pokemon don't exist in the real world. So, like, that's an obvious claim. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, we also don't want to. If we had the opportunity, we still wouldn't. So I guess thank you for clarifying that.
I'm happy. I'm happy to provide any clarifications required. Right.
At least we got out of the way early.
Yes. Right, I feel like that's our first clippable clip of the podcast.
Oh, the bit about. Okay. I think you need to start it with the context of you saying you only want to fuck humans.
Yes, that would be preferable. Okay, we'll go back to the Pokédex. We don't want this to evolve into smut. Okay, so we've got gold. By spreading the broad petals of its flower and catching the sun's rays, it fills its body with power. I like the fact it used power. That sounds like someone who's not very confident in their masculinity was like, yeah, power. They're powerful. They are. Look, it might have petals, it might have a flower, but it's got power.
Yeah, I tell you what, I really like that Venusaur is a big scary monster with a big pretty flower on its back. I feel like that's very cool. That's very, very cool, challenging gender stereotypes.
Yeah. I mean, we had it in the chat, didn't we? That someone found it like the scariest of the starters.
It is scary looking because it gets all like lumpy and big teeth, and it looks like it's gonna eat you. And then it's got a big pretty flower on it.
Yeah. So there you go.
Because I do find that like later grass type Pokemon, a lot of them are like flowers and berries and like pretty plants, which is fine. There are lots of pretty plants in the real world, and Pokemon should be, I guess reflective of that if that's what the creators want. But I like that it is also like, this is a pretty flower on a big creepy behemoth. I like that.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And it also smells nice. Oh, well,
and it
I'm
smells
assuming.
nice. It would be disappointed if it went from sweet smelling Ivysaur to like shit stinking Venusaur.
Oh, I've just flipped back onto the page, where it says, because that's the thing. I mean, what we're showing out to the people who are watching the broadcast versus what I can see, not necessarily the same thing. But I've just seen. I'm skipping ahead to Crystal. As it warms itself and absorbs the sunlight, its flower petals release a pleasant fragrance. So we have got it confirmed. Venusaur's smell bitching.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of big chunky monsters, if their smell is described at all, it's usually unpleasant, and I like that Venusaur is breaking the mold.
It's absolute. What's the word? It's like influential in many ways, as we are discovering on this podcast. So in silver, it's able to convert the sunlight into energy. As a result, it is more powerful in the summertime. I think that's interesting.
I think that makes sense, and you do have like that is also reflected in the games where you can like use sunny day, and like there are the ones that have weather, which I like, and I like that factors into things. I think terrain based impact can be, it could be better implemented, but it's also cool that it's there at all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So
I think again that makes sense with, I guess, the lore of this evolution line.
And again, it opens up that you could potentially do some stuff with. You could do like an episode where, Ash or whoever the protagonist becomes now is like doing like a battle in the winter and is not able to win because they're not able to get the power that they need.
Yeah. That would be very cool.
We've got Stadium 2, where I feel like whoever the professor is must have basically, like, their superior must have had a word, because I feel like they're more on track now. By spreading the broad petals of its flower and catching the sun's rays, it fills its body with power. It's as if it went, right, alright then, I'll agree. I won't do none of this about it.
We're just not going to talk about movement.
I'll just copy what you've said. Don't care.
Yeah.
So Ruby and Sapphire, there is a large flower on the Venusaur's back. That's presumably for if you can't see or smell it. The flower is said to take on vivid colours if it gets plenty of nutrition and light. The flower's aroma soothes the emotions of people. So there you go. You could use it as like aromatherapy.
I like that. I also like that it takes on vivid colours if it gets plenty of nutrition and sunlight. So like the ones that spend more time outside are gonna be, you know, big, beautiful, pretty flowers. And the ones that, you know, don't get to be out as much. I like the idea of like different looking Venusaurs depending on their environment. And I know in the games the sprites are the same all the time, and that's gonna be the way it is. But I think that idea of like diversity within a species, I find really interesting in Pokemon and how that would manifest. And I
Yeah.
think that'd be a good one.
So we've got Venusaur's. This is in Emerald. Emerald gets its own entry.
Ooh.
Venusaur's flower is said to take on vivid colours if it gets plenty of nutrition and sunlight. The flowers are why did Bulbapedia feel the need to put this into ice? Like other ones, it's combined them.
I feel like some of these entries are very similar. They just change the order of the sentence.
I bet you that was like 10 minutes before the end of Friday, and they were like, the boss was going, look, we need another 20 Pokedex entries before the end of the day, and they were like, just copy and paste the first bit and put it at the end. You won't even know.
Yeah, it's different enough that the plagiarism sensors won't detect it.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe again, this is the professor trying to get it past Turnitin.
Yeah, literally, exactly right.
A bewitching aroma wafts from its again the word waft, not a great word, is it?
Yeah.
The fragrance becomes. I like the word becomes.
Yeah.
Feels Shakespearean. Those engaged in a battle. Again, that's quite nice. Again, something that they could do where it's like, you could have a trainer who like doesn't really like to battle, so therefore does all these things to kind of like almost make the battle stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if things are kicking off and someone's like, go Venusaur, and people are like, oh, this beast is coming in. But actually it just uses sweet scent and everyone's then friends.
Yeah, and that's how they win all their battles.
Yeah.
Like
everyone calms down and wants to be friends, and then it stomps them.
Yeah, like how good would that be for like a trainer? Not a trainer, like a gym leader. Because that's the thing. I mean, I know we've chatted about it before. That like really they need to have more kind of diversity in terms of the gyms. Like they could have like a Batman kind of like themed one if they wanted to. Someone who's like a vigilante and goes out at night, and how like Pokemon's got like Doctor Who, who's like the Watcher.
Yeah.
But it's not really Doctor Who. But they could do the same with like Batman, and they could have. If you were to kind of look at it from like a different perspective, you could be like, okay, what different variations can we have on the gyms other than just typing? And they could do one where it's like entirely around basically making Pokemon like lose the will to like fight or make them all confused, and they kind of take themselves out.
Yeah, so I guess the gyms are less based on type and more based on strategy. Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting concept. I'd like to see that done.
Yes, if there is like any mods of that, let us know.
Yeah.
So we've got the plant blooms when it is absorbing solar energy. It stays on the move to seek sunlight. That feels like that second Pokemon professor really digging it in, being like, look, it does not remain quiet and still. It fucking moves to seek the sunlight. Right. For Diamond and Pearl, we've got after a rainy day, the flower on its back smells stronger. The scent attracts other Pokemon.
I like that. I feel like with Venusaur, these different Pokedex entries are adding more to what we understand about Venusaur as a Pokemon.
Mm.
I like that. I think it's different, and I think it's definitely got a like. I'm getting a more thorough picture of Venusaur than I did of Ivysaur or
Mm.
even Bulbasaur,
Yeah.
and I really like that. I like that I understand more about how this plant works and its relationship to the other Pokemon around the Venusaur and the other people around the Venusaur. Um, I think that it's very this is a much more comprehensive series of Pokedex entries.
Yeah. It's um, uh, I think it highlights how much they overlooked Ivysaur a little bit, even more so.
Yeah, it really does.
So we've got Heart Gold. By spreading the broad leaves, fills its body by same one. It's able to convert sunlight into energy. It's more powerful. Again, most people don't really read the Pokedex entries, you know, like because you get it and then it just kind of press A and it goes away. So maybe it's that they don't expect people to read these.
Maybe. I think, yeah, because I think with the common ones they do kind of skip through them a little bit. Well, I think they might expect people to skip through it a little bit.
Well, I mean X and Y, Omega Ruby and Sapphire. Again, we've got copies again. Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. Again, we've got copies again. We've got a new one here for the Stadium Professor's back at it. It's in Sword. Its plant blooms when absorbing solar energy. It stays on the move to seek sunlight. Oh no, wait, that's just another one of being like, it does not stay still. Shut up. We've got a bewitching aroma wafts from its flower. I like the word bewitching.
I like the word bewitching.
Yeah. Not
I
the
think,
word you expect to be in a Pokemon game.
yeah. Well, unless it's you're talking about like Misdreavus or something, one of the witchy, ghosty Pokemon.
Um, and I don't know if you knew this, but Gigantamax Venusaur has got its own Pokedex entry.
Ooh.
Which is, in battle, this Pokemon swings around two thick vines. If these vines slammed into a 10-story building, they could easily topple it. How did they find that out?
I feel like this is the kind of Pokedex that goes back to what we were saying about like the kids wrote it. The kids were like, oh yeah, well if your Venusaur can knock down a building, then mine is like a flower volcano. Ugh.
Yeah, mine could topple a 10-story building, whereas yours just stays still, Mr. Stadium Professor.
Mine goes after the sunlight and yours just sits there like a lazy little shit.
Your mama's Venusaur can't even topple a 9-story building. Your mama's Venusaur wafts so much stuff that no one wants to listen or hear or smell it even. And we've got for Shield, huge amounts of pollen bursts from it with force of a volcanic eruption. Breathing in too much of the pollen can cause fainting. Do you know what? Your mama's Gigantamax Venusaur stinks so badly that it can cause fainting.
Yeah.
Not even in Pokemon, in your dad.
I love it.
Okay, so we'll go into the Smogon rating before we give our Talking Trubbish rating. If it ever loads. Again, our second technical issue of the stream. I feel like we have ultimately done quite well as far as that is concerned.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Right. So that's Mega who it's on. We want normal, don't we?
It's got some decent stats. Um,
Yes. Um,
yeah,
well, this is the thing. I think it's if I'm right, and I'm not a what's the word? I'm not a competitive Pokemon battler, as I mentioned before. But I believe Venusaur is generally used as a defensive Pokemon or like a sponge.
yeah,
So you kind of like stick it out there whilst you're like setting up status effects, um, and it's basically there to kind of absorb those hits whilst you set things up for the other Pokemon in your team.
yeah. Like you can set up some poisoning, and you can set up a sunny day, and you can prepare the field for the rest of your team with Venusaur. Which I mean, obviously there is a lot of value in having that Pokemon on your team if you are into the competitive battling scene.
Mm.
I think for people like me who don't do so much of that, I mean, not the end of the world, but it means I'm less likely to do Venusaur because its move pool is geared towards that. Um, and while I understand that there do have to be Pokemon that serves that purpose, I don't know if I would have chosen to make one of them a starter because, I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I think I guess it encourages you to think more strategically if Venusaur is your starter, and to think about how to use its move pool to the best effect,
Mm.
um, in a way that, you know, Charizard, you can just fly blast the shit out of everything. Um, but as a child, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
As an adult, maybe I should use Venusaur more, and it'll encourage me to put more thought into my video games instead of just using them to veg out.
yeah. Well, I remember as a kid. It's like now, what I do is depending on what Pokemon I've got, I will like use a varied kind of move pool. So, for example, just for example, if I had a Venusaur, and I'm not saying it's got this, but if it had like a water move that it could learn, I would give it that water move. So that if I was up against a
Mm.
fire type, I've then got the water move to super affect it. But when I
Yeah.
was a kid, um, I would be like, of course my Venusaur should have all four grass moves. Like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I want it to have that?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I am definitely the kind of person who leans on stab as a key part of my strategy. And I do like dual type Pokemon. But I also, again, I really liked in the game, in the show, even like that Starmie that had Thunderbolt and like really like messed with your head the first time you saw it. And it's like, oh wow, like think of the different ways you can use Pokemon when you teach them things that you don't expect them to have. Um, and then like I never went ahead and like fully got very experimental on my own teams. Um, but I feel like if there was a bit more scope for that in the actual gameplay of the games,
Mm.
I would have done. But I do kind of feel like, and I get that this is a part of balancing them out so they're accessible to children still. I do feel like the more experimental and creative a um like elements of the game are sort of the meta game, they are in competitive play. And it's like maybe I just want to do it on my own and not be stomped by a 12-year-old who's got much more free time than me.
Yeah, very true. Well, you could say about every game that I play these days.
Yeah, that's that. I don't love the way that like they're trying to make everything multiplayer or predominantly multiplayer. Obviously multiplayer games are good. I'm not going to complain about multiplayer being a thing at all. But sometimes what I want out of video games is to be alone. when I don't want to do things with other people, so I'm going to sit down and play a game. Um, it's like a space where I don't need to worry about other people necessarily because, I have a social life where I do other things in that social life, and I do love playing games with other people, but if I don't have the option to play a game on my own, that's taking something away that I really find quite valuable out of video games is just sitting down, turning off, being in my own space. Um,
Uh,
and yeah,
as
yeah.
we've just had in the chat, it's almost as if they are making us have friends.
I mean, Pokemon tried this with Generation 1 and it did not work. I just got both games for myself and traded between them. Okay? If I want friends, I'll go out and get friends. But right now, what I want is Pokemon.
Yes, and I feel like that's a good point for us to give
It's
our
got to catch
talking.
them all, not got to share them all. God.
Very true, very true. Um, I used to genuinely find the trade Pokemon like the hardest ones to get, just because of my not wanting to give away any decent Pokemon, but also wanting to like what do you trade for a Gengar? Like, because I want to trade like a Pidgey for it. Um, so yeah, should we give it our talking Trubbish rating?
Yeah.
Venusaur, because I'm gonna give it, because of my personal connection to Venusaur, I'm gonna give it an 8.
I think I would also like to give it an 8, not because I have a personal connection to it, but largely because of um the story I've learned about Venusaur this evening.
Mm?
Like the way that those various Pokedex entries came together, it did feel like a much more realized and fleshed out Pokemon than Ivysaur did. Um, and again, I think it is also partly due to, like, I don't want to give it less because the show gave me this anticipation of such an amazing Pokemon, but I don't want to give it more because the game did not realize the potential I wanted it to have. Um, but I do like the way it has been fleshed out over the course of many games. And I feel like some real thought has been put into what Venusaur is, what it does, how it works. And I think a big fat 8 for a big fat lovely smelling boy.
Yes.